Hey, it is Zennial Gamer, and today we're going to be talking about what it takes to prepare in and compete in tourney level Siege. So, for a lot of you guys who are regulars to the channel, you know that last season was my first season in a tourney level Siege guild. This is my second season now, and you will have seen a few changes to my box over those two seasons. Like, you see all these Lulus here? You see, hey, look, there's some dupe Theamars. Look, there's a dupe Wusa. It's just dupes, man. The Gildongs were not built for Siege. Shh, don't tell anyone. Gildong's not very good in Siege. But yeah, tourney level Siege is a lot about dupes. It's all still true. I wish we didn't use so many dupes, but counter to that. But what I will say is that where the game stands today, the point of the point in time, or the point of progression of Summoner's War, where it is today, if we didn't deal with stacked bases and stacked fields of the same defenses, Siege would be too easy. And I have a video coming out soon about some of the changes I'd like to see in Siege. But where the game is today, I think the dupes game is something that's actually extremely important, because you can't give up an inch. When you're in a tourney level guild, if you want to contribute, if you want to participate, 92-93% win rate is kind of the floor that you're looking for. That means you need to go 10-0, 9-1, 9-1 every 3 sieges. That's 93%. You get 2 losses every 3 sieges. That's 93%. That's it, and that's the lowest possible that's acceptable. In order to do that, if you're facing the same defense 5 or 10 times every siege, you need to be able to bring the same offense, because a lot of times there will be a perfect offense that is proc-proof. It is RNG-proof. And after that one perfect offense, there may be like a whole bunch of offenses that will win 85 to 90, 95% of the time. Consider like a Galleon. You know, Galleon will get resisted 15% of the time. So if you've got Galleon, Tiana, Poseidon, you're going to see resistances, you're going to see losses. There's a lot of defenses like that that will win 85-90% of the time, but there's other defenses where the mechanics, or I should say, offenses, but there's other offenses where the mechanics of those offenses will allow you to win 100% of the time, no matter how bad the RNG is. Having a lot of dupes will allow you to run those offenses back over and over when you're facing the same defenses. Now, here is the counterpoint to that. When you think about building all of these dupes, and when you think about moving runes and things like that, things that to me, 2 seasons ago, before I was in a tourney level guild, kind of diminished the concept of Siege, what's not being considered or talked about is that in every siege you face different defenses. So even though in any one given siege you may be using the same few monsters over and over and over, and the same few rune sets over and over and over, you had to come into that siege prepared to face a wide array of different things, which means you actually do need to build even more monsters. You need to understand how all of those monsters work and interact, because you need to be able to be ready to counter whatever you face 5, 7, 10 times, and you need to have rune sets prepared in order to move them. Now, we don't need to go through my entire box right here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about dupes, but what I do want to talk most about in this video is how I prepare for Siege and how I manage all of these dupes. So, for starters, I have 4 Lulus. This is my Lulu build on the first Lulu. This is my Lulu build on the second Lulu. This is my Lulu build on the third Lulu. And you want to guess what the Lulu build is on the 4th Lulu? You got it. This is the Lulu build on the 4th Lulu. So the first thing I learned when I got into a tourney level guild is that when you build all of these dupes, the point of it is to still be bringing your strongest runes. Now, I have a super deep account. I've got, 700 runes at 105% efficiency or higher. So I have a really deep rune box. But at the end of the day, I'm facing my opponent's best runes. I need to be sure that I'm bringing, if not my best runes, some of my best runes in a build that makes sense. And if you do have to build hundreds and hundreds of monsters in order to prepare for all the different things that you could be facing in the next siege, you're gonna have to focus your runes in a certain way. So the way that I came up with was to build 1 or sometimes 2 or 3 sets for each dupe. Now, why 2 or 3? Well, let's look at my Trianas. So when it comes to the Trianas, I have I have 3 different builds for Triana, which means I run 3 different rune sets on her. So I've got one Triana that's in a resistance, slightly bruiser build because she's got some crit rate in there, but she's still basically tanky resistance on will. Then I have a Triana build that's just super tank on Nemesis, not even, this one's actually usually used with a Tessarian lead, that's why there's a 59 res. And then I have a crit damage destroy Triana. And then the other 2 Trianas, they're just sitting there with no runes, and I can just hot swap runes over to them. However, the Harmonias, there's only one build. And this is the only build that I'm running on my Harmonias, so if I am using a lot of Harmonias that siege, then I just swap the runes from Harmonia to Harmonia. That's the basic idea. We've got lots and lots of dupes. We've got 1 or 2 or 3 rune sets built for each dupe, and we move those rune sets as needed. But how do you track all of those runes? And guys, this was the hardest part for me. This is a lot of work. Half of you are gonna click off the video right now. I can't even say I completely blame you, but if you're interested in competing in high-level Siege, I really recommend you watch the next 5 to 7 minutes of this video. If you use the optimizer, this was the key for me to getting adjusted into high-level Siege. It is this tab right here. This is the priority builds tab in the Summoner's War Optimizer. Now, you don't need pro version for priority builds. You actually don't, because this is not about running builds, it's really just about prioritizing and tracking monsters. I will say this is a function that I don't think has been updated in quite a while in the optimizer. I don't think it's a super popular feature, and it probably does not play a huge role for most people outside of tourney level guilds because it's a lot of work to maintain. But if you are trying to compete tourney level Siege, or if you're just simply trying to manage a massive box, this is really helpful. Now, we have all of our different types of teams right here. So we have Giants, Necro, Punisher, Arena Offense. I don't know that you necessarily need to or even want to track that many different teams, because the more monsters you track through those different teams, the more complicated it gets. I've tried to simplify things a little bit. I just added weights of 100 for all my dungeon teams, but I later actually got rid of that. And you can see up here at the top, everything is 666. So originally I had weighted all my different dungeon teams as 100, but it got complicated figuring out like which Ikaru was in Solo R5, but also in Trikaru and stuff like that. So I later just took this other field at 666, just for fun, whatever number you want. 999 is fine. You just make it a number that's high enough that all of these are basically the builds I will never touch. So all of my dungeon teams, in this case, I have my Lucians in here. There's one Lucian that's my fat Lucian. There's a couple of other Lucians that are in dungeon teams. So all of my dungeon teams, all of my Lucians, my Tiana runes, those runes actually do get moved from time to time, but they always get moved as either a full set or most of a full set, and I know those runes really well. So those runes I don't ever want coming up in the optimizer, and then on down the list. So that's how I use the other right there. That's other 999. Now you can do whatever you want with the rest of this stuff. You can load it or not load it. Me personally, I feel like it's too much work, and I would just not use any of the dungeon team stuff. You can set those all straight down to 0. Now, TOA, if you're using the Summoner's War Optimizer on a priority list, TOA is not a concern of yours. TOA, hell, maybe though. So, if you are going to use TOA, I would only use it to track your TOA hell monsters, and then you can add whatever weight you want. Now, big thing to understand is all of this weighting, all of these numbers, they don't mean anything special except how to put the monsters in order. So it's just importance. And you can go 1, 2, 3, you can go 10, 20, 30, you can use 1,000,001. It's really just about how to get the monsters in an order for you where you're prioritizing. So in my case, this top set right here, I just wanted a really big number. It didn't matter what it was to take these monsters out of play. Now, arena offense, arena defense, generally speaking, the arena defense is like slightly more important than the arena offense, but it's less important than everything that has to do with Siege. All of this rift stuff, I give them 2-point weighting, and there's a reason for 2. Dimensional Hole, that to me would probably get the same weighting as like Arena Offense, because you can always rebuild those monsters, so that's about a 10. Siege Defense gets my biggest weighting. So Siege Defense gets a 50, Siege Offense gets a 10, but honestly it wouldn't make any difference. If Siege Defense was 12, it would still be above everything else over here. So there's no real reason to give these numbers anything like crazy big, with the exception that you do want to remember, let's say I put a monster on 4 teams. So let's say I have a monster that's on Arena Offense, Arena Defense, Siege Offense, and Dimensional Hole. With these 10-point weightings, those 4 teams give it a 40-point value, because it's how many points for each team. So in this case, I want to ensure that my 50-point Siege Defense monster still has more value than that monster that's on 4 teams that I care less about. And that's pretty much the main reason for that bigger separation in weighting. Now, what does all this weighting do? Well, it puts your monsters in order over here. And you can see, we're going to scroll down for a while. This is like all the monsters that I've got loaded into the priority list right now. Most of these are Siege Offense monsters. There's a few exceptions. So the reason for all of these weightings is for your builds menu over here. There is a checkbox that says ignore runes in higher priority monsters. Now, when you use this checkbox, and you can even see the pop-up right here, it says if enabled, the option will basically ignore all of the other prioritization options. In other words, if you're using locked runes or only runes from inventory, all this stuff up here, it gets ignored, and instead we go to ignore runes and higher priority monsters. Now, this is where the other 2 comes into effect. You can't ignore runes in a higher priority monster unless you are on the priority list. So, flashing red signs, pay attention to the video. If you've gone to sleep, pay attention to the video, because this is why your priority list will not work. Before you run a build for a monster, if you want to make it ignore builds in higher priority monsters, you must come up here and you must add it to your priority list somewhere. And that's why I use other 2 with a 1-point value. So in this case, you can see the last monster I ran a build for was Vigor. So Vigor happens to be in other 2. Once you have run that build, you need to take them out of other 2 and put them into whatever place they should be. So in this case, the Vigor build that I ran was actually a Siege Offense build. So we need to come back here and we need to add, and not just one Vigor, both Vigors. Why? Because that one rune set that I built, I will swap between the 2 Vigors. Now this brings us to why the priority list is such a big deal. If we look at some of these dupes that I have built here, guys, 10 Skogels, that's from a long time ago, right? But 3 Garos, 3 Covenants, 3 Bulldozers, 3 Coppers, whatever. I have 1 rune set built for each of these monsters. What happens when I move those runes? Because let's say I lock those runes, right? Let's say I lock the runes on my Copper. And then next siege I use Copper twice, and I move the runes, and then I reload my JSON. Well, the Copper that was locked no longer has runes, which means all those runes just got unlocked. And the Copper that now has those runes is unlocked. So when I am running my builds in the optimizer, all those runes that are part of a set that's built specifically for Copper are now available for the other builds that I run, and I will wind up breaking my monsters. It makes it incredibly complicated to try and keep your rune sets together in the optimizer if you're moving the rune sets in the game. That's where the priority list comes into play. So in this case, you guys just saw we had done a Vigor build. So we're gonna do another, just, you know, making something up right here. What's a Gildong? Oh, we have lots of Gildongs, right? So we're gonna start off, we're gonna come over here, we're gonna put Gildong into other 2. And then we just put in the 1 Gildong. That's fine. So you can see now he's ranked 206 on my priority list. Now we come over here and we just run whatever random build that we want to run for the Gildong. It doesn't really matter, but we're going to use ignore runes and higher priority monsters. Now what this means is the optimizer will not use runes from any of the 205 monsters above Gildong on the priority list, but it will use every other rune on your account from every other monster. So if a monster has runes that you want preserved, it needs to be on the priority list. So we run the Gildong build, we find the Gildong build, and then this is the build we want. So we go ahead, we click equip runes, we put the runes on our Gildong. Now we come back over here to the priority list, we take the Gildong off of the other two list, and we go ahead and we load up our siege offense, and we go ahead and we put the Gildong on to the siege offense list, but we don't just put the one Gildong we built, we put all 16 Gildongs. So, and then it's just really just click, 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 right? And you just get all the Gildongs onto the list. So guys, that's it. That's been the single biggest thing I figured out in order to manage my runes at tourney level in the optimizer was this priority list feature. And hopefully guys, you will find this useful. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. On that note guys, as always, hope you enjoyed the video. Doubly hope that you remember to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell notifications on, and we'll catch you in the next video.